All right, guys. So today we're going to do a little experiment. We're going to see if we can take cuttings from native fruit trees here, in our case chokecherry, and then try to propagate those trees to have them grow into new living trees. And you know, I've just been thinking lately, like, how can we help wild tend some of these native fruit trees here around us? And obviously you can gather seeds and do that. So for those that don't know what wild tending is, it's basically this idea of helping those native plants thrive in their environment. And for us foragers, that's obviously good because, you know, we take a lot from the land, we harvest, but if we can also give back, that's obviously then this kind of symbiotic give and take relationship that can really, you know, benefit us and the plants in the long run, so that future foragers can harvest more and you can harvest more in your spots. So I got some inspiration for this from a YouTube channel called Willow Scream Permaculture, and he was doing this with elderberry trees. So he was taking cuttings from elderberry trees and then planting them in the ground, and he says it's been very successful for him, where, you know, new trees grow from those cuttings. And I figured now we're kind of in this like late winter, early spring season where there's not really anything to forage quite yet, maybe a few spring greens here and there, but there's also no seeds to gather. So why not use this time where you would actually try to propagate a tree? This is like the time to do it, is late winter and early spring. Like, use this time to do some wild tending. That's basically the idea. And we're new to this, so no idea if this project or this experiment will really be successful, but we're going to give it a try. And like I said, we're going to do it with the chokecherries. That's the native fruit tree we have most readily available for us here in this area, but you could do this with a lot of different trees, or give it a try at least. I know people do it with wild plums, elderberry, and a bunch of other trees that you can do this with. So we're going to go around now, see if we can find some nice, you know, cuttings to take from these trees that have enough leaf bud nodes on there, or just nodes on there where new things can sprout from. And I'll get into more of that and what you're kind of looking for once we find them. But if this works out, this could be really cool, because it's one way to just help, you know, those plants establish more in their kind of local environment. And who doesn't want more native plants that they can forage from, right? So let's go ahead and give this a try. Okay, so we found a pretty decent stand of chokecherry here. What we want is about pencil thick of a cutting, and it still has the leaf nodes barely developed. There's a lot of these really thin ones up top on these side shoots here, side branches, that look prime, but they're just so thin. So we're going to do both. We're going to do some thinner ones and some thicker ones and just see how it goes. So here's one that I think looks really good. You know, you don't really need to be worried about hurting the tree, because at this time of the year where we're getting these are still dormant. The leaf buds haven't started to break yet or anything. So the tree won't feel it. And also, there's something to be said about pruning a fruit tree. People do this on their properties all the time to make their trees healthier and more productive. You know, you can remove branches that are growing down, branches that are rubbing up against each other, branches that show visible signs of disease or breakage. All that can help your tree actually be healthier. So if we're going to prune a few of these little twigs here now, it's not going to be a big deal. And you want to cut as close to the main stem as possible without actually breaking the bark on the main stem. There we go. Let's see. Get us some more. So here we have a few cuttings. This is probably the ideal thickness, you know, pencil thick. These are a bit thin, but we're going to see if that works too. These are just a lot better looking to me because they have a bunch of leaf nodes, a bunch of nodes along here where twigs haven't formed yet, and from there new plant material can grow. That's the nodes is basically, it's like that's where all that the growth cells are, and that's where new twigs, new leaves, new roots can grow out of. So what we're gonna do is with something like this, I'm just gonna trim these side twigs off. Oh, and I do want to mention that if you're doing this on public land, make sure it is legal for you to take cuttings and all that in your area. If you're doing it on private land to like further your own native tree population, that's obviously not an issue. But yeah, now we have a cutting here. And ideally, from what I learned from Willow Creek's or Willow Screen permaculture in his video, is that you want to have at least 2 nodes. Ideally 4 to 5, but also not too many. And the reason for having at least 2 is because you're going to stick this in the ground, and you want to have at least 1 node underground and then at least 1 node above ground. The underground node, it's going to realize that it's not up in the air anymore, that it's in soil, and it's actually going to transform that node into a root node, so a root can grow. Whereas the ones above ground are going to grow into twigs and start sprouting leaves and green plant material. He did mention that you don't really want to have too many above ground either, because once these establish into new trees, this first year now, they're going to be pretty weak. They're going to start sprouting some roots, and they're going to get going hopefully. But if there's too much green plant material above ground and you go into this year's winter, it's going to be very hard for this little tree to maintain that and to upkeep it. So there's a chance that during the winter it's going to die. So that's why you don't want to have too many above ground. To be transparent, what I'm not quite sure here with these now is if we can really manage to only have 2 buds underground and 2 above ground, because like I mentioned, there's so many on here, I would have to rip some off, and I don't know if that's a smart move or not. So I'm just going to keep more buds on there than, or nodes on there, than was recommended by Willow's Green Permaculture, and we're just going to see how it goes. So this one is maybe a bit long. I want this top growth here, and I'm going to make the cut below another node, probably right around here. So we got a lot on here now. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. Like, there's a lot on here. But I also don't want to cut them, you know, into tiny ones. So we only have, like, if I were to go with what he recommended with the 2 to 4 or 2 to 5 nodes, these would be this big, which seems like too small of a cutting for me. So we're going to keep some more on here. Just going to see how it goes. Let's cut this one. Get rid of these little twigs. And by the way, if you guys have any tips, if you have done this with a lot of fruit trees before, you know, let us know in the comments below, so we can learn from you. People watching and reading the comments can learn from you. We love getting your feedback. Okay, we got our cuttings, and we found a spot here close to a creek with a lot of sunlight. This spot should get sunlight like all day long. And one thing, you know, if you watch a lot of videos on taking cuttings like this, people will use rooting growth hormone and all that to get them going. So you'll put a little bit of this rooting growth hormone on the bottom. You could try doing that. We're not going to do this. Mostly because native plants, if you kind of grow them in their native environment, they really shouldn't need that, because there's a lot of microbes and fungi in the soil that the native plants have formed relationships with. So mycorrhizal relationships, and they will help the plant grow their roots and establish and grow. So if you're doing this in a native environment, you probably won't need it. You probably won't need it. So we'll see. That's all part of our experiment. We're not going to add any rooting growth hormone now. We're just going to plant these maybe like a foot apart. I'm going to start right here. And I'm going to put them in the ground so that at least 2 nodes are underground. This one, we have 1, 2, 3, 4. We're going to put 4 underground now. And what's nice, if you're doing this at this time of the year, you know, the ground already started to thaw. So it's nice and easy to stick them in there. And also at this time of the year, it's nice because you have all the snow melt, you have a lot of rain in the early spring, and humidity and all that is just going to help these cuttings thrive. Here's another one. I'm trying to kind of get away from this taller grass because as a lot of this grass is going to grow, I'm worried it's going to outgrow our cuttings here. Met some resistance there. And we did bring some string, so we're going to mark these so that we know these are our cuttings that we planted. We're also going to mark it on Onyx, our mapping system that we use for foraging spots. Some of this ground here wasn't letting me stick our fragile cuttings in there, so Lindy had a good idea. Why not take a little dead stick and make a hole with that, you know, kind of like pre-drilling it. And I think that's actually a good idea. Now I'm going to take my cutting and put that in there. There we go. Now one thing I do have to mention is that my friend Jacob, who's very in tune with a lot of the native botany here, he mentioned that it's a pretty low survivability rate for choke cherries specifically when you try to propagate them with cuttings. But it is possible, and the better option would be to get seeds and then cold stratify those and then plant those. And we're going to do that too. There's probably going to be a future video on that as well. I also wanted to let you know that we are gifting this book, Sam Thayer's Field Guide to Edible Wild Plants, on the channel right now. So all you have to do is leave a comment on this video, and if I reply with the mushroom emoji, that means you won the gift. Good luck. We're going to enjoy the rest of the day now, go on a little foraging walk, see if we can find some spring greens, you know, find some burdock spots to mark for the summer, maybe some asparagus. But yeah, if this turns out successful, we'll have another video up or a short showing you guys what happened. Fingers crossed this is all going to work out well. Thanks for watching.